Hi, I'm Espen Kraft. Thank you so much for watching. I dabble in vintage synthesizers, computers, and 80s tech in general. And one of the most common questions I get, especially on email, is what vintage synthesizer should I get, or should I buy my first vintage synthesizer? I get this question all the time, so today I'm going to give you 6 reasons why you should not get a vintage synthesizer. This is not meant to be a hardware versus software video, nor is it meant to be a gatekeeping video. After this one, I'm going to release another video called 6 reasons why you should get a vintage synthesizer. So let's go. Here's reason number 1 why you should not get a vintage synthesizer. They're expensive. Or they can be. A quick search on eBay or Reverb will show you that vintage synthesizers prices, they are peaking right now. So the really exclusive, sought-after ones are going for tens of thousands of dollars actually. There might be cheaper ones, so you definitely have to know what you're searching for and know what your price limit is, because they are expensive. Reason number 2, maintenance. I told you in reason number 1 that the prices for vintage gear are peaking right now, but so are the maintenance level. It seems like 35 to 40 years is the magic number where breakdown of components starts to happen. Right now, there's a lot of synthesizers, drum machine samplers, 80s gear that's starting to break down. I'm not saying it can't be fixed, because it can be fixed, but at what cost? And if you buy a vintage synth, it will break down. It can happen the next day, or it could happen in 1 year or 2 years, but it will break down and you need someone to fix it. So depending on where you live, finding a good synth tech can be difficult and it will cost. So you definitely have to adjust in the prices of maintenance in your buy. Reason number 3, dry sounds. So when you're turning on a vintage synth, you might be surprised or disappointed that the sound itself can be quite dull actually and boring. Many of us are so used to synths with effects, processing going on the sound itself from the synth internally, that a vintage synth will always or sometimes be quite a disappointment really. So you have to factor in, you have to use effects, processing, reverbs, delays, compressors, etc. to make the sounds come alive. So it's not a plug and play solution to buy a vintage synth in terms of sound. Reason number 4, logistics. There are no USB ports in a vintage synth. You have to use MIDI cables. If you have more than one, you need a MIDI interface, a MIDI patch bay perhaps, preamps to record your vintage synth properly. So that will also cost. It will also be management of new tech. So keep that in mind as well. You need something to make that synth come alive in terms of cabling and management. Reason number 5, you need space. Some of the more new hardware synths are quite small actually. A shorter octave span on the keyboards, often desktop modules, but vintage synths often come in big sizes, so you definitely need a lot of space for your vintage synth collection. And reason number 6, you might end up a converted musician going collector. You might get hooked, and you might want more than one, and suddenly you have 2, and suddenly you have 3, and suddenly you've become so hooked by the collection itself that you actually forget to make music. I've seen this a lot of times, people suddenly getting 30 or 40 vintage synths, completely stopped making music. I'm not saying that collecting synths for the fun of collecting is wrong, far from it. I respect everyone having a collection to admire, but for me personally, I like to make music with my vintage synths, and it's often a struggle to keep all those five reasons I listed up before this one in check, so I can actually make music with my synths in my collection. So keep that in mind. Buying your first vintage synth will probably not be your last. Well, these are 6 reasons why you should not get a vintage synthesizer. Please let me know what you think in the comment section, but please don't call me names or curse at me. I don't like that. Let's keep this a serious debate. As always, I'm Espen Kraft and I am the 80s. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!